What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Smoking Tire Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Off the Record. We love Off the Record. We're going to keep talking about them as long as we live over here. What Off the Record does is if you get a ticket anywhere in America, okay, any kind of moving violation, Off the Record will help you fight it. They'll connect you to a qualified attorney in the jurisdiction where you got that ticket, and that attorney will help you get those points off your record. It might mean complete dismissal, it might mean a reduction to something with no points, but they can almost always help, and you don't want those points on your record. It could mean affecting your insurance, it could mean affecting your employment, it could mean affecting all kinds of things. Trust me, it is worth it to do what you can to get those points off of your record. So go to offtherecord.com/TST or use code TSTPOD. That's TSTPOD on the Off the Record app. They will be able to help, and our code will get you 10% off all legal services with Off the Record. So go to offtherecord.com/TST or use code TSTPOD on the Off the Record app. Check them out. All right, folks, on today's show, it's my pal Adam Golden of Menta Watches. This dude is an expert in vintage. He's an expert in modern. And every once in a while, we like to have watch folks in to have a little watch nerd festival. So if you're into cars and not into watches, Adam's enthusiasm and knowledge is infectious, and it may help you get there. And given how many questions we get about watches, there's plenty of you that are already down that rabbit hole. So we're talking about all kinds of watch topics today with Adam Golden of Menta Watches in studio. It's the Smoking Tire Podcast. Let's go.
I was talking about how, everybody always makes comments to me about how they're jealous that I get to travel so much for work and how amazing it could be. And I'm like, listen, it's nice, but at the end of the day, as soon as I touch ground wherever I'm going, it's work.
Well, it's
and people don't understand that.
Yeah, I think you and I probably have it better than like my father. My father, who was like corporate successful, traveled all over the place, but it was hotel, nondescript office building,
right?
Nondescript restaurant, hotel, home. I mean, he went so many places and never saw anything. I think at the very least, like, yes, it is work, but like, when I at least I'm getting in a car and I'm seeing something, and maybe I'm eating local, maybe I'm going to a racetrack, maybe I'm finding a good road.
Yours is better than mine.
Well, you're going what? Watch shop to watch shop?
Yeah, I mean, like I was explaining to people, like for example, I'm in Geneva 3-4 times a year.
Yeah.
And as soon as I get there, I'm off generally to auction houses to inspect up to around 300 watches in a 24 to 48 hour window. Mm-hmm. And then from there, narrow down what I'm interested in trying to buy for inventory, inspect watches for clients that ask me to look at them and, make sure everything's good. And then racing around to meet different clients or, meet different dealers or, auction house managers. And it's never, the only time I break is when I go to dinner.
Yeah.
That's it.
So like, could you spend a day enjoying the city?
If I got there early.
Yeah.
If I got there early, not like in the thick of it.
No, not in the thick of it,
right.
But like, I say this about myself also, and the answer is usually no.
Right.
Like, why people are like, you're going to this place, why don't you take an extra day? It's like, well, because I got a business to run here.
That's exactly it.
And when the business here doesn't know that I'm working over there. I could be working, I could be on vacation. The business doesn't know.
Yep.
The business, I'm not here. That's what the business knows.
Yeah, that's like the exact sentiment.
Yeah. But it's probably better to be at an auction house inspecting watches or to be driving a sports car on a road than to be in a fucking boardroom full of guys in suits with a translator and their translator and having to sit through one of those conversations that goes back and forth at 1/10 the speed of a normal conversation.
No, I've done it. I was in my former life an attorney.
Yeah.
I guess technically I still am. I just haven't practiced in over a decade. But I used to work in Moscow, Russia.
Oh, good times.
Yeah.
Real cheery place,
It was great when I lived there. I haven't been back in, I don't know, a dozen years.
Yeah.
I don't know that I want to go back now. My wife is Russian. She goes to visit family every summer. She always asks if I'm coming with her. I say no. yeah, I don't think it's the best time for me. But anyways, we used to have to travel a lot to Europe for like exactly your dad. You know, I'd go straight to a hotel conference room and sit in a meeting and then go straight home.
Yeah, the room could be anywhere. It does the fact that you just took a 12-hour flight to get there? It's like there's nothing there when you're there. Like that's shitty.
Yeah,
I was amazed at how much my father traveled all over the world for 40 years, and like. And I don't mean this in a negative way about my father, but saw so little of the world.
Yeah.
You know? He's been to Vietnam like 10 times and like couldn't really tell me anything interesting about Vietnam. You know, like it just and a dozen other places because it was just in and out of that boardroom or whatever factory he was visiting.
And that's what the job called for, I guess. That's why he was so successful.
Well, yeah, for sure. The guy's and he did his thing and whatever and like you know, I was just gone and I was driving all over some like beautiful roads and some great cars. In our last show, I talked about a bunch of things that I learned while doing that and like, cool, okay, great. Yeah. But yeah, could I have? In fact, I did stay for 2 extra days because my parents live in that area, and so I spent the time with them. The fucking whole time, I was unable to relax.
Because of your parents?
Well, partially because of that. And also, spending time with my parents, I love them, but that ain't a vacation.
Right.
And I was just the whole time thinking about, oh my God, I got to get back to the fucking office. Got to get back.
Are you similar to me in the respect that you most feel comfortable in this setting at the office, like working?
I feel comfortable when things are either getting done or I feel most comfortable when everything is done.
Yeah.
Things are, I have this fucking list. I've gone through it. Everything is crossed off. Now I can go home. That's when I feel comfortable. But if I've got things on the list, forget it. Can't relax.
Yeah, it's weird. I've reached a stage of my life and my career where I almost prefer, it's horrible to say, be in the office working than be on vacation. I would just spend 25 days abroad, the longest I've ever been away.
Yeah.
In July, going all over Europe, you know, half work, half pleasure. And after like week 1, I was like, I can't do this. I need to get home. And I suffered through it.
Is it possible to combine, like, can you forget Geneva? Okay, yeah, you can't vacation in Geneva, nor should you. But like, could you go?
Nor should you.
I love Switzerland, but not Geneva.
Right.
Yeah, go to the Alps if you're going to do that. Go to fucking what's it called? What's it like? Well, Lucerne is also watches, but like I mean up.
Yeah.
Like go up to like where the Matterhorn is or whatever the fuck. Like my friend Cameron Barr from Craft and Tailored, he seems to find ways to like go to a place that he enjoys, chill, but then also sort of search for stock.
I mean, we're always working. No matter where I am in the world, no matter what time of day it is, like my phone is buzzing in my pocket. I could feel it, you know? It never stops. And especially because of the way and the rate at which things move in our world is so lightning fast now because of technology that you always have to have access to your phone to make sure that you're keeping up and keeping up with their competitors or, you know, satisfying demands of clients. And because of different time zones and everything like that, it's just 24/7 these days. So
that drug dealer mentality, dude, of if I don't pick up this call right now, someone else is getting that money. But I had that. It was fucked up.
But that's what it is.
I know.
And I've had scenarios where somebody's like, hey, I have this watch for sale, for example. And this is, for example, before Wi-Fi was really prevalent on planes. And I say, hey, I'm taking off on a plane from New York to Miami. You know, I'll be landing in a couple hours. I'll get back to you. As soon as I land, I said, hey, I'll take the watch, you know, and I had a client for it. You know, I remember this very clearly. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry you didn't respond. So I sold to somebody else. I'm like, you couldn't wait 2 hours?
Yeah, no.
I told you I was going to be in the air. I told you I was interested, you know?
Yeah.
No, can't wait.
Dude, when I used to move units in college, I literally got so addicted to not the drugs, to the money.
What'd you sell in college?
Weed and mushrooms.
Same.
And the ones where people do the drugs and then they at least leave you alone until the next day.
Yes.
The one you never want to sell the drugs where they do the drugs and then immediately need more drugs.
Later, like 4 a.m. Like,
no. That's I have friends who sold
just 1 more gram, please.
I have friends who sold things made of powders,
yes.
and you don't want to be in that business.
I
trust me.
With you 100%.
I wouldn't go out. You know, I wouldn't go out on a Friday night when my friends were going out because I knew the phone would ring, and if I wasn't there, someone else was going to get that bag.
Right.
It's a terrible mentality, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've channeled like certain addictions in my life to watch dealing,
Yeah.
you know, and that hunt. And because I'm so passionate about it and I love it and I was a collector first, it always becomes or stays rewarding for me. There's obviously a lot of business aspect to it, and we move a considerable amount of volume for being specialists in vintage because there's not a lot of stock and inventory, and we're selling.
Well, by definition, there isn't anything new.
Correct. So we're selling
All
anywhere
the
from
vintage will ever exist.
has already existed, exactly.
Exists, yeah.
So we sell anywhere from like 80 to 120 watches a month. And
That's a lot.
And that's 95% vintage. You know, there's a little bit of contemporary modern stuff in there, but mostly vintage. And so to do that, you need to be on it all the time.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot.
Right.
And those, and every one of those deals is, $1,000 to $100,000 in your pocket.
In revenue. Yeah. It can be. Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
For sure.
Right.
So it's a big deal.
Right. So it's very similar. It's like a drug dealing mentality.
For sure.
And so I don't know that I necessarily
moving small packages worth huge amounts of money, being contacted by people on the internet
who are obsessed and like expect you to respond at 3 in the morning.
Product.
Yes.
Yeah. People who can't wait 2 hours or someone else is getting their business.
There is a strong parallel.
A huge connection between these two markets.
Yeah, and like I love cars. You know, I own several cars. I hate to call myself a collector because it's never really organized. The cars that I do own and buy in and out of. But with watches, if you want to sell me that watch on your wrist and I'm in Florida, you're in California, I send you a shipping label. It's in my office the next day. I'm sending you a wire. Like it's done in 24 hours. There's no paperwork. There's no title. There's no insurance. There's no, there's an inspection element to it, sure, but like it's so much more fluid. And so I have so many clients who they'll buy a watch and within a couple weeks, a day even sometimes, they move on to something else because they see something on social media.
Yeah.
And they're able to get in and out of that watch like lightning fast pace, whereas a car, it's a little bit more, tenuous to do.
What year did you start selling watches as a business?
As a business, 2014.
Okay, so Instagram was already a thing.
It was already a thing, but people in my space were not utilizing it properly. I think I don't want to say revolutionary in that respect by any means, but I think I was able to connect to people and try to do community building, whereas not a lot of people were kind of doing that. They were just, post a watch for sale and not really engage with the general
now
community.
It seems like you have to be like an influencer personality to do it. Like the people who just post pictures of their inventory don't get the same amount of volume, inquiries, sales as the people who do like whether it's those videos of them like haggling in the fucking the
fake videos,
the wholesale markets, or
right.
whether it's it's people inspecting stuff, testing it for gold or diamonds or whatever. They are better at presenting themselves as like experts that way, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, listen, there are a lot of guys who do it very well who do not make video content. I just released a YouTube video today with Eric Wind, who was on the podcast here. He doesn't do a lot of video content, but he's one of the very well respected vintage watch dealer. There's a lot of big names that do not do vintage content. There is a shift though, because the goalpost keeps changing. At first it was enough to have a nice website and an Instagram account, but if you want to continually, raise your exposure, the shift now is into video content, and short form video content. So you mentioned Craft and Tailored, Cambar. He does a great job at promoting himself through content. I do a lot of it. There's guys like Mike Nouveau who blew up on TikTok and is bringing it to the masses.
I've seen that guy.
Good friend of mine. So it's entering a new chapter, I think, into watch collecting. I think cars have been there for a while in terms of like that kind of content. Yeah,
but yes, but they're like you said, they're harder to buy and sell. You can't just be moving them constantly. Yeah. And also my friend Carl used to say, a house, a car, and a watch are the same size on Instagram. Folks, got to take a quick break because Get Maine Lobster is in the building. They sent me a box of lobster tails, and oh my God, bro. I love a lobster. I like to do it on the grill with a lot of butter. It's not exactly healthy, but it is delightful. And I'm all about quality, whether it's cars, watches, food, and boy, does Get Maine Lobster deliver. They're ranked the #1 lobster delivery company by Good Housekeeping with over 16,000 5-star ratings. It's clear they're doing something right. I know they're doing something right because they sent me delightful lobster tails, wild caught off the coast of Maine and flash frozen for peak freshness. Absolutely delicious. Like I said, on the grill with some butter, little garlic. I am in that game. I think next week I'm going to make some lobster fried rice. That's going to be delightful. For you folks out there, because you're part of the Smoking Tire family, you can get 15% off your order of Get Maine Lobster. Just use code TIRE, T-I-R-E, at checkout. Seriously, folks, this is some fire lobster. It's the best you'll ever eat. It's so good. Head over to getmainelobster.com. That's GETMAINE lobster.com. It's funny, they've got the letter E and really big in the copy because apparently people don't know how to spell the state of Maine. GetMainelobster.com and use the code TIRE. Get yourself 15% off all orders store-wide. Top-tier stuff. GetMainelobster.com. Promo code TIRE. 15% off everything store-wide. Yeah, buddy, those lobster tails are good. And what about Delete Me? This is an important one because someone you know, maybe you, maybe your mother, maybe your father, maybe your sister, your brother, they have been either a victim of identity theft, harassed, stalked, doxxed, etc. Maybe it's as simple as like getting lots of robocalls. I don't know what's happened to me in the last few weeks, but my robocalls seem through the roof. And it's because my personal data is out there for data brokers to buy, right? My convenience, I'm ordering stuff online, I'm shopping, whatever. I got to type in my phone number, and then the robots end up calling me. It's super annoying. It's being compiled by data brokers and sold online. They make a huge profit off your data because it's a commodity, right? And then you can stop this, though. Now you can stop it, protecting your privacy with Delete Me. All you have to do is sign up and provide Delete Me with exactly the information that you want deleted, and their experts will take it from there. Delete Me will then send you regular personalized privacy reports showing what info they found, where they found it, and what they removed, right? It's not just a one-time service. Delete Me is always working for you, constantly monitoring and removing the personal information you don't want on the internet. To put it simply, Delete Me does all the hard work of wiping you and your family's personal information from data broker websites. So take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me now at a special discount for our listeners. You can get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/tire and use promo code TIRE. That's the only way to get 20% off. The website is joindeleteme.com. The word join is part of it. joindeleteme.com/tire and then enter code TIRE at checkout. 20% off. joindeleteme.com/tire. Code TIRE. Let's get back to the program. But in reality,
I like that.
Not the same thing.
I like that.
You
I'm
know,
gonna steal
and
that.
so if you wanna show off something cool, you know, but if you wanna have a collection, I mean, you can have one safe that's got 50 watches in it, but if you want to have 50 cars, you see what this looks like.
Yeah,
It's not the same kind of thing. And I think a watch is like a sports car that comes into the bar with you.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
So eloquently said.
Well, because there's so much crossover,
Right.
Right? It attracts the same type of person, even if they don't literally like the same exact things.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of clients who I've met through the car world and vice versa. It's, two sides of the same coin almost. The emotion that it brings out in you, the way you relate to it as like a physical object.
Yeah, well, there's art and science, there's history,
Right.
there's, the connection to motorsports or whatever. I mean, I'm sure, I don't know about you, but like literally you want to ask, hey, Matt, what's the hokiest question anyone's ever asked you? Can you describe the connection between cars and watches? You fucking come on. The most obvious question ever.
What's the dumbest question people ask you all the time that you wish they'd stop?
What's the dumbest question people ask, Zach?
People ask what are your favorite cars. I wouldn't call it dumb, but it's the most common and it's impossible to answer.
Right.
No, I think the dumbest is if you had to buy one car, car A or car B.
Right.
That's the dumbest because
You hate that question.
I hate that
I don't hate
question.
it, but you hate it.
Because it is so deep.
Meanwhile, a few months ago, I'm asking Matt, like, hey, dude, I'm trying to help my dad pick out a car. Please, I know you hate this, but like, help me.
No, I want to give you car. Like, I want people to, and like, it's not that I don't want to be asked car advice. I understand that is literally the job.
Right.
And I want to help you find a car that you want.
Right.
But what I don't like is if you had to pick between these two. I don't, and guess what? Neither do fucking you.
Yeah.
You don't have to pick between these two. You're picking between everything. And so if there's no reality in which those are the only two cars that exist and you have to choose between them.
Yeah.
That's why that is the dumbest question ever. So if they rephrased it and they said, which one of these two do you like better?
Right.
I could probably give you an answer.
That is what the question is, but it's
It
delivered.
is. It's not
phrased
it's
the right way.
hyperbolic, yeah.
thoughtlessly fucking phrased. Like words. Use them somewhat correctly.
Well, people just want like a quick answer. They usually want to validate their own opinions
Well,
that they already have
that's
too.
what they- that's
that's
also
what
what
it
they really
is.
want.
You know,
That's also what they really
They want you to pick car
Yeah.
A because that's the one they really want,
Yeah.
and they just want to hear
Yeah.
somebody like you say it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll just say, "Hey, I like this car." Am I a moron?
Yeah.
No, probably not.
Yeah.
Probably
It's
that, or when people ask me to compare two cars that are so huge. Hey, I'm looking at either a GT4 RS or an X5 competition. What do you think? Well, if you need a back seat, a GT4 RS won't work.
Right.
And if you want all-wheel drive SUVs, a GT4 RS probably won't work.
Yeah.
And if you want to like rip up a racetrack and have your eardrums blown out,
Clearly it's
maybe the
X5.
X5 is not what you know what I mean? Like they can solve that problem
Right.
themselves. And I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know if there's an equivalent with watches. I don't know if there's an equivalent because like they all fucking tell time. Either it's water resistant or it's not is sort of your binary. And then is there a
Well,
function
wouldn't
that
like,
you need?
That'd be like a G-Shock altimeter or whatever versus a really simple field watch. Like one has
Yeah.
15 functions,
Yeah.
the crossover. The other one has one.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the analogy, or the example of what you're talking about
Yeah.
with GT4S or X5 or whatever. It's the same thing. People ask me like, oh, well, should I buy like this dress watch
Yeah.
or this dive watch? And I'm like, well, what do you want it for? Like,
Yeah.
what's your prerogative? And they don't understand why it's such a wild question to ask. Now,
Yeah.
if you're asking like within Submariners, for example, like,
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
want from this generation or that generation? What kind of characteristics should I be looking for or
Yeah.
decide between? That's a reasonable question.
Sure.
you
Yeah.
know?
Or do I want a 911 GTS or GT3? Like I get that.
Yeah.
That's fine. But it's Do I want the James Cameron Deep Sea or a 1970s Calatrava?
And
You can't figure that one out.
Yeah.
Like, one is an anchor, and one is like
Literal
a
anchor
and
to
one
your
is like
wrist.
a penny.
Yeah. So I keep looking at that. Tell me about that. Yeah,
My
let me see
watch?
it. Yeah, we've never talked about it. You
Notice
just-
Canyon. This is the new Night Sky. That's the prototype, but the orders are now open for October delivery.
So what's the story with this brand? Like, how'd you meet these guys? Like,
Do you know Notice?
No, I don't.
So people are going to get bored right now because I've said this a lot. They're from California, Wes and Colin, these two guys in L.A., and they're it's a micro brand, right? So
Right.
it's one of many, but I've really been impressed with their quality. They don't necessarily their designs are straightforward in a way that I like, but they're not copies of anything, which
Right.
I also like. And they approached me and asked if I wanted to
That's fine. That's fine.
and asked if I wanted to do a watch, and I said yes, I would, but it has to be a new watch. It can't be just a new color of something they already make.
Right.
And so they said, okay, well, what would you want your watch to be? And I'm so spoiled because I was sponsored by Crown and Caliber and then Bob's Watches for a while. So I got all these demo watches to try on. So I probably got 30 years of collecting in about 3 or 4 years without having to spend any money.
Right.
Which is like such
It's a
spoil-
dream.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
a dream.
Yeah.
So all these watches that I saw on Instagram, I would get to try for a month and I would go, I love this, I don't love this. And I end up, now the watches that I've bought there's a real consistency to them
sure.
because I've narrowed down what I like. And so my requirements for this watch, which is called the Canyon, was 41 millimeter, no more than 11.5 millimeters thick, 3-hand, no date, 200 meters water resistance, screw down crown, Jubilee bracelet that starts at 20 millimeter and tapers to 16. Quick adjust clasp, right?
Thank you for
There's
doing that.
the right way to do things.
So
and the
many
wrong way to
brands
do
get that
things.
wrong.
I know.
Oh my God.
Quick release bracelet with the quick pins. I don't know what they're called. The toolless, no tools. You can pull the bracelet off without
Right.
tools. It's a Lejeune Perrette automatic movement, Swiss movement,
Oh, cool.
68-hour power reserve, super bright lume, and then dial colors that have a lot of depth to them and that you could see from like across the street.
Yeah, I love the faceted dial.
So we sort of applied indices, and so we sort of benchmarked the Oyster Perpetual 41 in the fun colors. It's not quite as thin as the OP41. I couldn't get it quite as thin as Rolex can with their own movement.
I mean, when they're outsourcing all the parts, and ordering components, it's difficult to do.
Yeah.
Even for brands that are making in-house stuff,
Yeah.
it's difficult to
Yeah.
do. That's why there's a constant competition for like the world's thinnest watch.
Yeah.
Nothing we ever need, by the way.
Yeah.
Like the next version of that's just going to be an NFT on your wrist. But like no one needs this.
Yeah.
But they keep doing it to push boundaries, which I respect.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it is cool. And so with this one, I wanted it to be the kind of thing where if your everyday watch is a Seiko, this feels like a step up. If your everyday watch is a Rolex, it doesn't feel like you're slumming.
Right.
It's quality, it's tough, it's very legible, the colors are fun. And it's the kind of thing, most importantly, because I was designing it, that I would want to wear every day.
Well, I think that's the most important thing,
Yeah.
too. It's like, so I'm a big fan of this new brand out of Switzerland called Berneron. And the guy's name is Sylvain Berneron.
Never heard of it.
Okay.
Can you get how do you spell that?
Berner, Berneron.
Is that like a Berliner, like someone from Bern?
No, that's his last name.
Oh, okay.
And he worked for Breitling for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
He was involved in the revitalization of Universal Genève,
Mm-hmm.
industry guy. And he ended up designing the watch that he wanted that did
Mm-hmm.
not exist, with no restrictions.
Berneron. Let's see
So
what this looks like. The
it's-
movement looks very pretty.
It's completely new caliber in-house. Everything he's done is
Wow.
bespoke
Very
because he
nice.
had to really create something new to fit the dimensions of the case because nothing is straight on the watch. Like when he flips it around and you see the front of it, you'll completely understand why. It's like a homologation of like a Cartier Crash, a Gilbert Albert
Zach, can you
Patek.
go up and click on timepieces and
Yeah,
let's
click
see
the front.
front of this watch? Let's see what this looks like. The Mirage. Oh yeah, okay, it does.
You probably saw it on Instagram.
It's got crash-like vibes.
Yeah, and it's like a kind of Picasso where there's
Yeah,
nothing
funky.
even and straight on the watch.
Yeah, it is funky. Yeah, cool.
And the guy is amazing, and he, like you,
Looks
made the watch.
It looks melted.
Right.
Yeah.
And he just released a smaller version that has stone dials in it. Really doing a great job, and I just respect the hell of the fact that he made the watch that didn't exist that he wanted to wear, and he kind of like pushed the boundaries and was like, no. Like there's a lot of things, I made a whole video about it, that he didn't want to compromise on, and like he stuck to it.
Yeah.
And it raised the cost on things significantly.
Sure.
And it made it much more difficult, where he could have taken an easier path, And so for me, I'm assuming with these guys, with Notice, you actually grew like a friendship with these guys,
Yeah,
a relationship.
yeah.
Because for me, it's so important now with all the micro brands coming out there and independent watchmakers out there, that they be good people. And like you want to actually have a relationship with these people.
A lot of them do a good job at that.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
The ones I've met have been nice, but I suppose that's a small sample size.
Right.
Putin's micro brand, not great.
There's a lot of these brands who just don't understand the community aspect to it and how important it is to cultivate good relationships with your clients and foster enthusiasm.
Well, the first two colors we did, we only sold to our patrons on the show.
Okay.
And so the first color, which was the mint green, it sold out in an hour.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, we did
Nice.
we sold 100 of them in an hour.
What's the price point?
$1,200.
Okay, not bad.
So it's the most expensive watch that Notice has ever made, but it's the highest specification watch they've ever
Right.
made. It's the most water resistance, it's the best movement.
What's their like general run of the mill watch?
It's 500 to 1,000.
Okay.
So it's not like it's not like they're
Drastically
selling
more.
Yeah, it's a little more, but it costs more to make.
Right.
I had very specific requirements. I feel like we're selling a $2,500 watch for $1,200.
Well, it reminds me, and I'm not comparing that to what I'm about to say, but it reminds me of the conversation that like Portnoy was having when he created that whatever bullshit
Brick.
brand.
It didn't
watch
go
brand
well.
that actually bricked.
Yeah, it wasn't
but
good.
He was trying to create this like sweet spot of a watch in that like $2,000 price point range because he was saying that he couldn't find something good in that price range, which I thought was kinda
Silly.
crazy.
There's so many watches in
So
that
many
price
good
point.
watches.
Yeah.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
But yeah,
Oh, wow, they're still in business? Or is their website just still up?
dude, they probably have overstock. That
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, if you went and offered him like 30 cents in the dollar, he'd be like, thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, he was really. It was really bullshit. I mean, these
Yeah.
were not quality items that he was trying to sell for a pretty premium
No,
price.
sir. My friend went and like explained that all, broke it all down for him
Yeah.
on YouTube. Like went to his house and like explained every part
Yeah.
of that. Like this is how much it should cost to make, and like this is why all of the watch people all over the internet are bashing the shit out of you right
Yeah.
now. Yeah,
He's
he,
like,
didn't, he didn't get it.
oh.
He didn't know what he was getting into.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Folks, winning season is here. It's time to get back to football, and MyBookie is here to help. They are going to make every game so exciting. You're going to be sweating buckets because you're not just watching the game and eating wings over here. You got some skin in the game. You know what I'm saying? It's MyBookie. It allows you to bet on all kinds of football-related things from the comfort of your own couch with a bucket of wings in your other hand. You feel me? And this season, MyBookie is pulling out all the stops with risk-free boosts on Thursdays. You know what that means? It means you bet. And if you win, you win. But if you lose, you don't really lose. That's right. If you lose one of those bets, MyBookie will refund your wager. Where else have you heard of risk-free betting before? It doesn't exist except for on those weekly risk-free boosts on Thursdays. But that's just the beginning. MyBookie is giving away hundreds of thousands in prizes with their Super, Survivor, and Squares contests. Get your entries in now for your shot at a huge cash reward. When you're ready to get started, just use my promo code TIRE, T-I-R-E, to claim a bonus that doubles your money on your very first deposit. You heard that right, folks. Double your money with promo code TIRE before you even place a bet. And now, loyalty pays off because MyBookie Plus is in the house. The more you play, the more you win. It's simple. Climb through the tiers of the loyalty rewards program, just like I do with Delta Airlines, and unlock even more epic promotions, exclusive giveaways, and bigger rewards. MyBookie Plus is the lock of the century. Bet on anything, anywhere, anytime, and make your season a winning season. And thank you to MyBookie for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Now, back to the show.
Like you're able to do that because you come from a place of watch collecting your whole life. You
Yeah.
know? So like you know what to do, not to do. You know.
Yeah, it's not
Right.
not to sell fucking junk for $1,200.
Yeah.
I mean, but there's other people that
those are
don't.
so bad.
Yeah, these are. I mean, if those watches were $100, it'd be like, okay,
Yeah.
They're
then
all
it
on
would-
sale. There's
500 off.
They're $1,900 down from $2,400.
yeah, that's not.
Which is not
something
enough.
You should be spending $1,900 on
Yeah, it's
by
not
any
enough.
means.
Yeah. I expect to see it close out for like 5 cents on the dollar
Yeah,
at some point. You
it's
know,
not
like not
great.
even like exaggeration. You know.
But
he tried, I
I have a
guess.
tough time with vintage, though. I break them. I'm not careful enough with them, and I break them.
I mean, we talked about your Speedmaster, I know, before.
Yeah, I've broken it 3 times.
I mean, have you gone into any neo vintage stuff? Like 80s,
stuff
90s,
from the 90s. Yeah, I have an
Sapphire?
Icopod, Hemipod.
Okay.
That's nice. I've
Right.
got a couple pieces from like the 90s. That's about as old as I can get.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've every week buy barn find, fresh original owner watches, whatever you have from the 1950s, 1960s that are still as if nothing happened to them. And usually that's Rolex because that's more of a tool watch or like an Omega Speedmaster or something like that. But it's the same thing with the vintage car. You really have to kind of be cognizant of how you're using the watch,
Yeah.
when you're using it. Sitting in Miami and LA, you should be fine. But like I wouldn't take a vintage Submariner, deep sea diving?
No, I know. You know what? I think part of the problem is I'm lefty and I wear it on my right hand.
That's it.
Banisters, handrails, banisters.
That's what it is.
Door frames.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that where it's not something a lot of people think about, but the number of times I've bashed a watch into a banister or a handrail is a huge number.
But if you bought something super special vintage-wise and that was worth a lot of money, whatever, you would be much more mindful about it.
Probably
because you want to
would.
preserve it. It's
no,
like
no,
a vintage
I probably
car,
would.
you know?
You're right.
Yeah.
And I have a couple pieces that are pretty expensive, and I wear them selectively, and I don't wear them to the. But I really like wearing a pretty nice watch every day.
Sure.
So I don't want to limit myself and go, I can't wear this now. I want to wear it now.
Yeah, I get you.
So
I would look
I
into.
end up like washing a car or like more like changing some car's battery. You know?
Right.
I'm like, this is
This
crazy.
is not
Yeah.
what I should be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a good friend of mine who's another watch dealer / watchmaker. He had a client who collected vintage Submariners and like expensive, rare stuff that's irreplaceable. And he would always want to make sure that they were waterproof, water resistant, because he's like, I go deep sea diving with them. And I'm like, why? You could just buy, like you said, a James Cameron and not run any risk. And he's like, well, that's what they were made for. Like, why wouldn't I use them as they were intended? I'm like, because they're 70 fucking years old. Yeah. I'm like, you don't buy a vintage Ferrari to necessarily race it. You drive it around to Cars and Coffee.
Boss ass fucking people do.
There are boss ass people who could do it. But like, generally, most people don't. Okay?
Yeah, I think there's probably, I don't want to project my values onto someone else that might be much more boss than me, but there's driving a vintage Ferrari race car on a track versus going scuba diving with a 70-year-old watch. I can't imagine the sensation that translates into your personal enjoyment is anywhere near
correct, because that was a tool watch.
Yeah.
Like, you only need it to be able to make sure you can breathe at a certain depth.
Yeah.
And so long story short, the guy gets pushed into a pool with a 1950 Submariner with like a tropical, beautifully aged dial, amazing condition, irreplaceable watch. By his girlfriend, the crown was not screwed down all the way, flooded, gone.
Yeah.
I walked into my friend's office and the watch is in pieces on his desk. I'm like, what happened? He's like, you know what happened.
Yeah.
I'm like, I told the guy this was going to happen. You know? And it did. So, but yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, is the visceral experience and enjoyment you can get at by like whipping a 250 around a racetrack.
Yeah,
versus
that's different than jumping in the ocean with a watch that's 70 years old instead of one that's 10 years old.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah. There was some story I was on, I don't know, Hodinkee or something, about a guy who had done 5,000 dives with like a gold Rolex, but it was a modern one.
Okay.
And I thought that was kind of a boss move.
Yeah, I think so
it
too.
It was pretty pimp.
Yeah.
But it wasn't 70 years old. It was a modern watch.
Right. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, you need to be happy with how you're using your watch, looking down at it on your wrist. Like, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter what I think, what you think.
It's pretty
doesn't
much
matter.
fashion. I dress like garbage. This is the only thing I wear that I think, I grab whatever T-shirt is closest. I grab whatever shoes and jeans are closest. The only thing I think about 51 weeks a year. Pebble Beach week is the only exception.
You're like texting me like, which watches should I bring?
Well, that one too. Yeah. That was a thought.
But yeah, and it's funny because I get so many nasty comments. Not a lot, but it used to be more than it is now about how I dress on my YouTube videos. And they're like, you're selling all these expensive watches, but you look homeless. And I'm like,
you look like your customers.
Right. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I dressed in a suit and tie for a long time, went to work every day. Now I do what I love. I don't fucking care. I want to be comfortable.
Yeah.
I don't care what other people
Nor should
think
you.
about. Yeah, fucking cares.
There are those fashion people.
Right.
And that's fine. And you're going to sell some of them watches.
Sure.
Cameron is a fashion person. Bless him. He's, you know what I mean? The guy's put together. Bless him.
Yep.
But I don't need to do that.
Yeah, it's not me.
It doesn't matter to
If
me.
it makes him happy, great.
Yeah.
But like at the end of the day, and I've gotten comments where like, "Oh, I'd never buy a watch from you because of the way you dress." I'm like,
that person
you
was
were never
going to
buy a watch
anyway.
to begin with. I've sold watches to.
Person has 520 credit. They're not buying a watch.
Yeah,
they're not sending the wire, dude.
Yeah, serious people. I've sold to some the wealthiest people in the fucking world. They do not care. They dress worse than I do. You know?
Dude, the richest guy you'll see at a Cars and Coffee is wearing the worst fitting jeans.
Yep.
New Balances and a white shirt with the logo of a hospital on it. tucked in and like a really bad fitting hat.
Right.
And that guy's wearing a $300,000 watch and gets out of his fucking Ferrari 812, Competizione.
Right.
And is like, the guy doesn't give a fuck.
Doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah, that's the guy.
Let me ask you a question. When you go to car events here in Southern California, because I don't think I've ever been to any except for Car Week last year, do you see a lot of guys who are into vintage cars here collecting vintage watches?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
I need to move to California.
Yeah.
Is in Miami, for example, and I was talking about this with Zuckerman a little bit actually, and like he thought I was crazy, much in the same way you just reacted. But in Miami, for example, the guys who do have vintage cars are always wearing a modern, like Richard Mille or Audemars
that's
Piguet,
interesting.
You know?
I mean,
the crossover is not there.
I think if they're driving a modern supercar, there's better odds of them wearing a modern high-end watch.
Yeah.
I actually think the vintage, the guys who wear vintage watches that I see at car stuff here, they're not wearing like Paul Newman Daytonas. They're wearing vintage Heuer, vintage Seiko. They're wearing maybe an older Rolex, maybe an old Porsche design. It's mid-high end stuff.
Okay.
It's not the crazy. It's not 50s Pateks or anything like that. It's vintage sport watches, vintage motorsport relate stuff that's like 2 to 10,000.
Right.
A lot of that.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of that.
Yeah, I don't get any of that seen locally.
Oh, yeah, in Miami?
It's wild.
No, Miami's not a city where
Miami
old
sucks.
things.
Yeah,
Miami's great 2 weeks a year.
I'm
born and
ask
raised
a question. Are the people that are driving the old cars but wearing new watches, are they younger people, older people, or is it everything in between?
I would say it's everything in between.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, generally, it's not like if you drive a vintage car in Miami, you're of an older demographic because that was like your generation. No,
Okay.
I'm part of a vintage Porsche group that it's anywhere from mid-20s all the way up 50s, young 60s. So it's everybody in between. And by the way, of that group of like 100 people, none of them are watch guys. Or vintage watch guys, I
Yeah,
should say, you know?
yeah.
So, it is fine. It is what it is. But,
I mean, there's same thing with cars. Like, there's more modern than there is vintage because I think, it's sort of easier to in our Instagram world, it's sort of easier to like show off the new thing.
Right.
The old thing is typically a little more like subtle. I mean, like the difference between a Submariner that's meters first or a double red Sea Dweller. I mean, you got to look pretty close to tell the difference between a watch that's $8,000 and one that's $80,000.
You have to care. Yeah.
Whereas with a car, it's right there in your face.
Yeah, but sometimes even with cars, like you have to check under the hood, to understand.
Right, but
you
I'm
know?
saying the difference between a 911 and an Aventador SVJ.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's right in your face.
it's right there.
Right.
You can see the difference
Right.
versus with watches. Man, the difference between this one that is this much and this much is 5 or 10x could be the smallest little
Detail.
Yeah.
One line on a text on a dial.
Yeah, I have a Rolex Kermit,
Right.
which I love, but it ain't a flat 4 Kermit, And for those who have no idea, what I'm talking
Scrambled
about
cereal.
For like 1 year, Rolex made this watch, and like the top of the number 4 in the bezel is like a little flatter, like a little, not even a lot. It's like a little flatter. He's not. He's shaking his head.
I mean, there's a discernible difference when you see it side by side, but you have to
if
be.
you're not looking at
Yeah.
them side by side, 99.7% of the people would never be able to
and
tell.
are
So-
the rest of the numbers the same?
The same.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
The rest of the
that's
entire
pretty
watch is the
specific.
same.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
And there's probably a 30% difference in price
Correct.
between the two.
So I'm going to say something that's I'm sure going to piss off a lot of people who are in the watch world, especially on my side of the fence, especially as it relates to Rolex. A lot of these minute details that lead to like a 20-30% price increase are fictitious. Like in the sense that they were created by probably Italian dealers back in the 90s and 2000s to be able to say, hey, this watch is worth $10,000 and this watch is worth $15,000. Let me tell you why.
Like
'Cause
the
it has
Long
an
E?
Well, Long E is just, a Mark dial. So for me now, with all these, and it used to be, a Mark E was worth more than a Mark IV, or a meters first was worth more than a feet first. I am now of the position, and I've treated my business in such a way for the past, let's say, 5 years, that I care very little about the difference in executions of a dial. I care more about the originality and condition. And whichever one is the nicer watch of the two and the more original watch of the two, that is the one I will pay the most for. And that is the one I will charge the most for. These little minute details that people invented, I mean, they exist, but like invented as like a judge of which watch should be worth more 20 years ago or so, for me, it's bullshit and is not as important as a lot of people make it out to be. Vis-a-vis flat four versus non-flat. Yeah,
I don't
Who
give
cares?
I don't give a
Right.
shit. It's just I was just an example of something that people will use to justify an added
Yeah.
value when most watch enthusiasts
Right.
wouldn't even be able to
Right,
tell
and
the
people
difference.
love to wax poetic. Oh yeah, it's because it's rare. It was only produced for a year. So what?
Yeah.
So what? You know, you're telling me you'd rather have a flat four that's all scratched up and beat to shit versus a regular Kermit, that looks brand new? For me, no.
Is that just marketing scarcity within scarcity, though? You're like, well, these watches are rare.
Well,
and
Rolex
there's
makes
this
a lot
one
of
that's a
watches,
mistake.
right?
Yeah.
So how do you convince someone that something common is actually rare?
Correct.
Same thing with cars. You see this shit with cars all the time because they'll say, okay, a Ford Mustang isn't rare,
Right.
but they only built 17 in this color for this model year with this option combination,
Right.
And
And this
once-
one was sold missing a spark plug.
yeah, and
so
once
it's
you drive
different.
the car away from that auction stage, exactly 0 people give a fuck. It's only the person buying it and the person selling it that are going to go anywhere near that marketing language to care.
Yeah, I mean,
know?
it obviously varies watch by watch, car
Yeah.
by car. For example, you look at like Paul Newman Daytonas, and people love to say, "Oh, Paul Newman Daytona is so rare." No, it's not. They made a lot of them. Now, how many still exist in all original condition and in good condition, not fucked with, and of certain references? That's when you actually get into details that matter. So, for example, the one that Paul Newman himself wore was the very first reference, 6239, with pump pushers on the side. And then as the Daytona evolved and the evolution of the Daytona, they changed to screw-down pushers.
Yeah.
And when they changed to screw-down pushers, that's when the production of those watches actually was smaller and they're much harder to find. Hence, they require or they command a much bigger premium for the watch, and you see a lot less of them. But in general, the production of Paul Newman Daytonas was vast,
Yeah.
and for a very long time,
Yeah.
for several years. So you always see, rare Paul Newman. Well, some of them are rare, but most of them are not. People use that globally. So you kind of like have to dig
The word
deeper.
rare in general
Is a misnomer a lot of times.
I think probably very overused.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it in cars all the time where someone calls something that rare that really isn't.
Right. Yeah.
Or that might be rare-ish now, but was common and they all just were ultimately like thrown away.
Well,
it wasn't rare production.
It's only rare because you can't immediately with the snap of your fingers find another one.
Right.
But, in a week, maybe another car pops up with the same characteristics,
Mm-hmm.
So do you think it's harder to be an expert at the minutia and detail of watches or cars?
Man, I actually think it's probably harder to do watches.
I think the opposite. I think
Really?
cars. Yeah, I think cars.
I think everything about a watch is so much smaller.
Right.
Like everything is so much smaller and so much more like the differences. Like you have to look so like I can look at an Aventador. Just to use this example, from 100 yards away, and I can tell you what sub-variant of Aventador it is. But I have to get pretty close physically to a watch to see subtle nuances of what year, whatever.
Yeah.
And the stuff that the marketing jargon, not to use I don't mean jargon in a derogatory way, but snowflake hands and this and this and this and this. And,
Right.
I mean, I imagine if I was as passionate about watches for as long as I've been passionate about cars, I probably could do it.
Yeah.
But I'm always impressed at there's a guy I follow on Instagram that's like chrono.holic, who's like, this guy? Assume it's a guy.
I'll hold my breath.
All right. Well, it's like he's
Hold my
like a
tongue.
Speedmaster like nerd. And
Sure.
Speedmaster people are the nerdiest people, I think, within watches.
There's a couple other groups, but yeah, I agree with you.
Who's nerdier than Speedmaster people?
Seiko guys. Grand Seiko guys.
Grand
Yeah.
Seiko guys are very nerdy, but I think Speedmasters are so nerdy because their reference numbers look like the fucking Dewey Decimal System. It's like, oh, you should have a 102.42.74,
right.
and this is a 103.32.46,
right.
And that's why it sucks. And I'm like, I don't know what you're fucking talking about, man.
Didn't he like come up to you once and like tell you something was wrong on your watch? Like
he didn't come up
cute?
to me. He actually, I again assume it's a he.
It's a he.
They're always he.
It's a he.
But I assume he did accurately point out that my Speedmaster had a service pushers, which were now. Do I give a shit is a different story, and I ultimately do not.
But was that information unsolicited? Like he just like messaged you or walked up to you and said, "Service pushers."
No. It was. I had talked about one of the times I broke it,
right,
and the pusher came out and he DM'd me. He said, hey, just so you know, those are not the correct pushers for those case. I think the point was he had the correct pushers and said, I can sell you the right ones if you want them. It was not malicious.
Okay.
It was not malicious at all. And ultimately, it led to a very interesting back and forth where I learned this dude filed an extract on my watch on my behalf, like just to learn about it, which I thought was nice. I learned that the watch has a service movement in it, which, great, don't give a fuck. But it means the watch is worth $5,000 instead of $50,000. I didn't pay. I paid $5,000.
Okay.
I paid $5,000. Yeah. It's worth $5,000. But we had a moment of almost holy shit.
Holy fuck! Win the lottery.
The case and the dial, assuming they are original, came from a serial number that's like within a couple hundred of Neil Armstrong's watch. But it has a service movement in it. Okay, so whatever. So it's not worth as much.
Right.
Don't give a fuck. It's an old watch. Now it can just be an old watch.
Right.
Fine.
Well, it's a huge problem in the watch world where there's a lot of like backbiting and people trying to, I guess, flex their knowledge and point out issues with watches, whether or not the owner actually wants to know that or not. And it's a problem because it takes away from people actually just enjoying the watches.
Yeah.
You know?
And I want to be doubly clear. This person was not being malicious.
No. I get that.
It was a very interesting bit of learning I did about this watch that resulted in me being in exactly the same place
position where you are.
I was before. It was fine. And shout out to Marina Bay Watch Company for servicing my watches and getting them running every time I break them.
Nice.
But Grand Seiko people are pretty nerdy as well.
Right. And it's very similar in the same vein to like you go and hop on Bring a Trailer and you're like, these motherfuckers.
Yeah.
Like I've been so scared to sell one of my cars on Bring a Trailer. There actually was one up that somebody else listed for me. I'm like, I do not even want to read the comments. Because like when I buy a car for myself, like, yeah, I'll check to see his original paint, blah, 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 blah. But like, especially living in South Florida, I like my cars to not be pristine because I don't want to worry about them.
Well, that's why you should use a local partner like Westside Collector Car Storage, which is a Bring a Trailer local partner. And we dispassionately list people's cars for them on Bring a Trailer and other auctions.
Nice.
And I'm able to not take it personally when someone criticizes the car because it just is what it is. It's not mine.
Fucking shipping in my cars from now on.
It's
I don't want to deal with it.
it's totally fine. And yeah, some of those commenters are just being dickheads.
Right.
Some are accurately pointing out things about the cars, whether that information is solicited or not.
Right.
Some are intentionally trying to drive other potential bidders away to keep
I feel like there's a lot of that.
By far the biggest dickbag commenter I've ever dealt with on Bring a Trailer was someone who was doing that exact thing. They came to look at a car in person. They were nice. I brought a mechanic in to do a PPI. They asked me for a recommendation, and I brought a mechanic in to do a PPI for them.
Right.
They said, thank you for your time, and they left. And they basically went back and went in the comments and accused me of being a liar who was misrepresenting the car because the mechanic found some things about the car that I wouldn't have known.
Yeah, of course.
I'm an enthusiast, but I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, this is what a PPI is for. It's for finding those things. I didn't hide them. I didn't lie about them.
Did he then bid on the car after?
He then bid on the car, and the car got a record. It was the most ever paid for a F1 gearbox Ferrari 612. Okay. And it was an unbelievable color combination. It had like $100,000 in options on it. So it's expected that it would have got that. So it was more than anyone's ever paid for one of those. But this guy, who didn't win, he got the second highest bid. Even his bid was more than anyone's ever paid. And so this guy...
So it was clear bullshit.
He
talking
talked
shit to try to
mad
scare people
shit
away. Yeah.
And then bid anyway.
It happens in the watch world, although there is no platform quite like Bring a Trailer where there's a giant community of people commenting live
Why
in real
isn't
times.
there?
I mean, you have some new auction sites called Loop This. Actually, two of my friends run it. And there is an option to comment, but people just don't. You know, I think the audience
seems like
is smaller.
Collecting Cars has got this watch collecting one also, but it
Yeah.
seems like it's all modern watches.
It's all modern watches.
Yeah.
A lot of that used to happen in the watch world where you'd have this like really rare and important watch, and all of a sudden everybody's excited about it, and then you start hearing whispers like, "Oh no, I think the dial's been reloomed, or this part's been replaced, and it's not, something's wrong, the provenance, there's something up," and it starts spreading around. So I even went through that a couple years ago at a Christie's auction. I was bidding on this really rare stone dial called a coral dial. Rolex did
That's
actually
the red one, right?
Yeah, it's like orange.
Those
red.
are sick.
Beautiful. And I hear all these people whispering like, "Oh, well," because I was talking about, I'm probably going to bid on it. "Oh, there's a crack on the dial, right?" And I'm like, I fucking looped this thing for a long time because that affects the value a lot. I know there's no crack. I don't know there's a crack. I hear from like 4 different people. "Oh, yeah, there's a crack. Yeah, there's a crack." And one of the guys who was shouting that the loudest.
And you had it in your hands?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Shouting that the loudest. And even a client wanted to bid on it. He's like, "I heard there was a crack from literally from Canada while I'm in Geneva." Where did you hear that? The guy shouting it the loudest is sitting behind me bidding while he sees me bidding.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "You motherfucker." It's harder to do that now in the watch world because it's harder to manipulate prices because it's so big, the world's so big, and you have all these people in other countries online bidding that you can't control what they hear, the information they hear. You know? So,
well, it's weird to me, like as many people go to these watch auctions in person that go to a high-end car auction. Similar number of people, similar vibe, similar prices. For some of this stuff, it's insane the money.
No, watches.
I'm genuinely and with Bring a Trailer and Cars and Bids and other sites like it, as a repeat seller now, it's shocking to me that one guy excluded how few people get a PPI, how few people look at the car in person, and how many people are willing to click bid for tens or hundreds or multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars without seeing the cars in person. It's just
personally attacked.
No, I
did that. Well,
fine, but and maybe that's just how our culture works now. But but I'm saying it's crazy that a watch version of that hasn't
it exists.
taken off because it seems like the audience is there. So what's the fucking deal?
I have so many fucking clients that are like, "Oh, I bought this watch, I just got carried away, or, I just saw it looked nice." And I'm like, "You could have asked me to inspect it because, there's some issues there, But listen, I've done the same thing with cars. It was by mistake. So I was looking for a Porsche 993 RS, one of my Grail cars, and I was finally ready to pull the trigger on one. One pops up in the very first RM Sotheby's Miami sale. I'm in New York, actually, for watch auctions, and a local car dealer friend of mine, sends me a picture. It's in Guards Red. Hate Guards Red. Fine. It's a Club Sport. Don't want a Club Sport. Fine. And the estimate was $350 to $450. And now understand, in the watch world, if the estimate's $350 to $450, they will not hammer it for $290.
Yeah.
They will maybe pass it through at $340 and cut 10 grand of their commission, but they will not hammer it for $60,000 under the estimate. You see where this is going. So I tell my friend, and he looks over the car. "Oh yeah, looks great," but this is the day of the auction. So I'm like, "Listen, if you want to bid for me, if I could get it for $280, $290 hammer, I think that's cheap. Should be fine." Thinking there's no chance in fucking hell that he will get this car. I'll win this car. I'm putting my kids to sleep. I'm sitting in pitch black in their room, waiting for them to fall asleep. And all of a sudden, my phone buzzes, and I see the name. I open up. He's like, "You got the car." I'm like, "What do you mean?" My heart sunk. Because first of all, I wasn't planning on buying this car.
Yeah.
I don't have the amount of money required to buy this car, presently liquid. Anyways, so I get the car for $290 hammer. So plus fees, it was $315 all in. And
that seems like a pretty good deal if the car's legit.
And that was the crazy part, is that everybody's like, "Oh my God, you did so great. You stole that car. You did great."
I don't know about stole, but that's a good deal if the car's good.
But It wasn't. It was not. Well, listen, I enjoyed. I loved the car, but it was just unlivable. Club Sport in Miami, unlivable.
Race cars on the street are bad. But what was not good about it?
There was a lot of things not good with the car. And so, it was kind of the same thing happened with like the watch world and what you're talking about. All this like people behind the scenes with like weird motives. Like there's apparently, and this is not my world, so I hope I'm not upsetting some people in the Porsche community. But apparently, there's a guy who keeps like record of all. I think he's in California. All like the RSs or whatever.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and like he apparently like bashed this car before the auction, and like the car had like 80 grand in like receipts in the past year, and so. Mechanically, it was a sound car, but like ARM Sotheby's didn't disclose that it had been hit. You know, it had been like heavily tracked in Europe. It was improperly imported before 25
that's
years.
Really a problem,
right? And I talked to some like lawyers and like people who actually know, and enough time had passed that it wasn't a problem to resell the car. But like all this shit, you know, that came out, and again, I didn't do my due. I didn't think I was going to win the car. I bought this by mistake.
Yeah.
And so, and of course, I'm not going to back out.
There's a lesson in this.
There is a huge lesson in this, and I lost a ton of money. That car went on bringing trailer, and I lost a fucking fortune.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, but it's life. You know, I remember walking down the street because the auction took place down the street from my office, and I walk up, and I've never bought a car with them before, but knew a lot of the mutual people. A guy like tosses me the keys. I hadn't even wired the money yet. He's like tossing me the keys. He's like, yeah, it's on the wire. I'm like, I'm off to Turks and Caicos. Fuck off. You know? No, I wired them the money, obviously, but it was like, I think they were like happy to get rid of that car, you know? Yeah. And so whoever bought it and bring a trailer did great because they got it cheap.
Yeah.
You know? They have a great track car now. You know?
I mean, my advice for buying cars is find wherever the car is, like find a local independent person to go look at it.
That's why I have Marco look at a lot of my cars and stuff whenever I can.
He was supposed to be here tonight, that fuck.
Couldn't get a babysitter, he said.
Bullshit.
He's a piece of shit.
This is why you don't have kids?
Yeah.
Just saying.
Fuck the kids.
Do we have anything on the Patreon? Okay, let's get to that in 5 minutes. Couple quick questions. Are big watches about to be cool again? Big watches had about a 5-year run and instantly got not cool.
So I think you're asking that in the context of now a lot of people gravitating towards smaller watches. Yes. I mean, listen, I think it's more of brands are going with trends, you know, so that's why you see a lot of move towards smaller watches. And I think obviously it's influenced by celebrities and people, you know, kind of following the herd, so to speak. For me, I have smaller wrists. I don't feel comfortable wearing anything above 41, 42 millimeters. And even those watches has to be like a Speedmaster. Will they become cool again? Probably, because all this shit's cyclical. Everything's cyclical. You know, all the watches that are in fashion now and in vogue now were popular before, and then something else came and took their place. So I'm a firm believer that all these trends are cyclical. Do you think cars that are not as popular right now, like I know like 80s, 90s cars are having their moment in the sun, but like 50s, 60s cars that kind of dipped a little bit, will they come back? It's kind of the same question.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's tough with 50s and 60s cars are actually huge right now.
Okay.
Possibly even bigger than they were in 2007. I just think that 80s and 90s cars have gotten the headlines because they rose more on a percentage basis.
Right.
They've risen more.
Okay.
But I think 60s cars are hot again. When you start getting really old, like 50s and earlier, it's very hard because the people that remember them as kids are dying.
Right.
And so I don't know if because they're harder to drive, harder to keep running, and part of the reason I think modern cars, supercars and that kind of stuff are doing sort of better than vintage cars right now is because people want to just use them as a car.
Yeah.
And
not worry, you know?
You go to, I was at Pebble Beach this week, and every year I go to Pebble Beach, and there's a palpable shift from it being a week that's about vintage cars to a week that's about supercars and hypercars.
Right.
And part of that is the traffic and people wanting to, if they're going to be sitting in traffic, they don't want a car that's going to like overheat or whatever.
Right.
So they'd rather drive their brand new, Ferrari 296 than a GT Lusso.
Yeah,
like
sense.
an old Lusso.
And I totally get that. I drove in Car Week in the 912. And sometimes it was great. Other times sitting in traffic, I'm like, this sucks.
Yeah.
But yeah, with regards to like bigger watches, I think the problem is that so many people and bigger guys who have bigger wrists discounted smaller watches because they had it in their head that it looks silly on them. And that was very much a main character syndrome problem because me personally, like I hate wearing yellow gold watches with a yellow gold bracelet. And I was talking in my office with a client saying, I think it just looks silly on me. Like it just doesn't work, kind of looks tacky. And he's like, dude, that's main character syndrome. Like you think it looks bad, but no one else is looking at you and be like, oh, that looks like shit.
Yeah.
So I think guys who were afraid to wear smaller watches, very much just thought it didn't look right on the wrist when in reality it looks great,
Hold on 1 second. Sound guy needs to change batteries. So we'll just pause.
I mean, okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I don't think we need that many more.
I don't think
sound
I don't think we need sound right now. We're going to do some Patreon questions, but
Okay.
whatever.
Okay.
Knock yourself out. You
I
can
wasn't
just.
sure if I didn't want to miss that part.
No, I think we got
you're
so
good.
much of it.
Okay.
so,
You're okay.
yeah.
Let's see. So we have, of course, some questions on the Patreon. Some are going to be
Okay.
watches. Some are going to be cars.
I moved the cars to the bottom.
Okay, so we'll see what we got.
Okay.
Let's see. Of course, if you want to ask us questions for the show, if you want to get an ad-free listening experience, if you want to catch the live stream or involve yourself in our lives, the Smoking Tire podcast on Patreon is what you need. So, Swimming Remy says, I've got an early 60s Tudor Submariner 7928 with what appears to be an older replacement dial. It's missing the Swiss markings on it. Why would someone go through the trouble of putting the right font and verbiage on the dial but leave off the Swiss markings? Could Tudor have done this?
I mean, I'm going to allow you to send me an email with a picture of this watch because I don't think this is going to be a very simple answer. If it's an early 60s, it's going to be gilt chaptering, gilt Swiss. So the Swiss wouldn't have been really removed, which leads me to believe, because of the gilting process, you can't just remove it. Which leads me to believe this might have just been a completely refinished dial, like top to bottom. But shoot me an email, send me a picture. You're right, they probably wouldn't have gone through the trouble of like doing perfect font without putting back Swiss. So something doesn't kind of make sense. My guts is telling me it's just completely refinished, and they just did a really good job. So it looks like it's original, but it's not. But shoot me an email.
Okay, Drew Arts was a fan of the Watch and Listen podcast. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's still on YouTube. They took down the when I sold it to Crown and Caliber, and then Crown and Caliber then sold to Hodinkee. They took it down, but it's still on YouTube, so you can
Nice.
get all 50 episodes of the Watch and Listen podcast on YouTube still. And says, any chance of a Green Canyon with a date? We have 4 more colors coming up. I will not comment yet on what they are, but the Canyon as it exists is not going to have a date on it. We may have another all-new watch coming in a year or so under the Canyon brand name, and we're considering a date, but not on this
Do you
one.
ever use a date function on a watch?
I set it when I put my watch on, but it's something I could easily live without.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not a date guy.
Old Rusty Bimmer has a 20-year-old Seiko Arctura. It's basically been a $250 watch its whole existence. I love the watch, but it's a lot of metal, and sometimes the bracelet gets tiresome. Are there options to change the bracelet? I'm sure there are. Can you Google? I don't know exactly what that watch looks like.
don't either, yeah.
I mean, there's almost no such thing as a watch where you can't change the bracelet.
Well, if it's integrated, it might not be possible.
Oh, is it that one? Seiko Kinetic?
Yeah, right. Maybe.
Kinetic arc. Go
No,
to the
go to
right.
the
Two to the
right,
right. Yeah, one more. That one.
Yeah.
Oh, is that like some kind of weird case design?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's probably there.
That
lies
may
the
be
rub.
one of the very few
You'd have
watches
to
that
get,
you.
got to get a custom strap made.
That's
for that.
full custom.
Full custom.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's
Which will probably cost you more than the watch is worth
yeah,
to do.
True.
Sadly,
It is probably gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a full custom job, and it can be done. It's just money.
Well, the
No,
problem
look.
is, but look, you're going to have that gap in the front.
Yeah, it'll
That-
look.
it's
weird.
going to look weird. You could put spring bars in there, throw a NATO on it, throw a strap that fits it. Looks like it's probably like 18 millimeters.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, but you're going to have whatever that gap is in the front.
Possible, but probably weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say not worth the trouble, but
I agree.
yeah, if it's going to keep the watch in rotation, try it. Try just like a NATO because that's a cheap investment. $25 somewhere. See if it works.
Yeah, or
A
less
little
even.
single pass.
Yeah.
What's next, Zach? We've got. Oh, Prashant says, I want to say the Strapsco rubber bracelet with Rolex style clasps fits brilliant on a noticed sector. Oh, great.
Nice sec.
Oh, I've been trying to figure out which one of the fake Oyster Flex options, because there's a few,
Right.
would fit on this case nicely. So that's helpful.
Do you know Mark from Horace?
Yeah, I asked him, I said, can we do a collab?
Right.
He's a lovely guy.
Great.
And I said, can we do a collab? And he said, yes, but before I design a whole new one for your watch, you should just order a couple of the ones I already make and
see how it
see if
works.
one fits nicely.
No, he's a great
And so I
guy.
haven't got around to it yet.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, let's see. Below average nerd, my father has 2 watches and asked my brother-in-law and I to decide which one we would prefer. One is an early 60s Longines 5-star Admiral in 18-karat yellow gold, and the other is a Hoyer Carrera from the 70s with a full metal bracelet. Both are in perfect working condition. Are there any other factors besides color and style to consider with my choice? Are either of these more rare, collectible, or have something the watch community finds particularly interesting?
I would say, first of all, pick out the watch that you like the most.
Yeah, the one you want to wear.
The one that's probably worth more money is going to be the Hoyer Carrera from the early 70s. It sounds like it's probably like a 1153 or something, automatic chronograph. There's a much bigger collector base for those vintage Hoyers, especially a crossover with cars and everything like that too. Admirals are cool, but that's a much smaller, like dressy style watch. The Hoyer is going to be more versatile. It's a sportier watch by far. But if you're looking for collectability, for sure the Hoyer. Like there's just it's not even comparable.
But forget the value, but I would say whichever one you want to wear.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah, because
it's
this
always
is like
the most
an
important
heirloom
thing.
watch. You're not going to sell it.
Correct. You know,
Yeah.
and it's not like the values are so. It's not like one's worth $2,000 and one's worth $20,000.
Yeah.
Like they're somewhat close.
Vintage Hoyer is cool, though.
It is.
Joe says, "What everyone at the table? What is your money no object dream watch?" And he loves your YouTube channel.
Oh, thank you, man. It's like the most cliche fucking answer ever,
Yeah.
but it's a steel Patek Philippe perpetual calendar chronograph reference 1518.
Okay.
It's like every like super watch nerd's grail. Like,
Okay.
but it is what it is. You know.
Mine is not something old. I would go MB&F. Legacy Machine Evo with they're
so good.
They're crazy.
I love
they're just
Max, and I love those watches.
Yeah, they're
I just
so
sold my
sick.
LM101, and I kind of regret it, but I want to do something like special with them.
Yeah.
The only problem I have with MB&F is that their watches are very big.
Yeah.
Because of how they construct their watches, they have to be
Yeah.
big. But they are so innovative. They are absolute geniuses. The new Architect, HM11, I think
Oh
it is.
yeah, it's crazy. This is that the thing with it's like the cross.
The house,
Oh
yeah,
my
and
god, it's crazy.
And you wind the watch by twisting.
That's
it is
fucking nuts. Yeah.
mind-boggling. I want, and that actually fits really well.
They're
on
the
wrist.
Koenigsegg of watches.
Yeah,
they make
that's
they
accurate.
make a watch as if no one has ever made a watch before, and
Yes.
and they're inventing watch
Like-
from scratch every time.
If you ever go to Geneva, you have to go
Yeah.
visit them. It's an insane.
Look at that fucking
process.
thing.
Yeah,
That's
dude.
crazy town.
It's every single subdial there. You know, you can see the time on that one is something different. Like one's the power reserve, one's the crown to set the time. I forget what the other one is, but you rotate it around depending on what you want to see.
That's
real
Freestanding
crazy.
balance in the middle. It's fucking wild.
Yeah.
And on your wrist, it is just so cool. No one's ever made anything.
I mean,
like
the
this.
fact that the promotional video for this looks like a set
it's like
from,
alien
you know,
shit.
Dude, and like
Arrival. This is
Max
wild.
was like inspired for this one from like a Art Deco house
Yeah.
that he saw that has windows just like that. Like he takes inspiration from everything. Like
Yeah.
the bulldog was like from a bulldog, you know?
Yeah.
And he goes out of his way to make his life as difficult as possible, but to make something truly unique and top of the line technology wise, like
Yeah.
true high horology.
I did not win the lottery for the new Mad One.
The new thinner one?
The slim one.
Did they send out the results?
Yes.
I've never won any. Maybe I got
Check
that
your
one since I didn't get it.
Yo, someone on fucking the forum said it went straight to their spam folder, dude. Check your
I
fucking,
never fucking win
check
either.
your
I never-
spam.
I never
I
win
did
either.
not win.
Yeah,
I'm
you know,
gonna
they
keep
just
entering
sold
though.
25% to Chanel.
I know.
What do you think about that?
Listen,
So did Jordan.
fucking the government.
So did Jordan.
The government of
Still kicking.
Bahrain owns McLaren. Like, what am I going to
Yeah.
do? You know, like sometimes you got to sell out to the evil empire. Like,
Yep.
what are you going to do?
It is what it is.
Flannel Bob says, "What is the best and most unique timepiece car integrations you've seen in the automotive world?"
I mean,
I mean, Bugatti Tourbillon is so on the nose, you can't fucking avoid it, huh?
Exactly. And then last year, the guy who had that Rolls Royce custom made where
the watch
popped out.
Yeah.
That was fucking cool, man. That
I mean,
was really cool.
I actually was just driving. I mean, we're talking about a $55,000 car. I was just driving the Mercedes CLA 35.
Okay.
And when you go into the launch control modes, on the screen is an IWC Big Pilot chronograph.
Really?
And it's got a fucking, like when you do a launch, it starts winding, the chronograph, and it times you using an IWC on the dash, which for a relatively affordable car,
right.
I realize that $60,000 is a lot of money, but it's literally the cheapest AMG car you can get. It's a pretty cool use of that integration.
That is cool. I mean, yeah, there's such a rich history there, especially with like Hoyer dash timers and stuff like that. That there's so many cool ways they could go about doing things like that. So I'm happy to hear that some
cool.
brands are bringing it back.
Yeah.
The integration of watches and cars.
Those are the prototypes for the Bremont dash clock when they made that.
That's
right before the rebrand. They sent me.
Yeah, I did really well. There's the car community loves dash timers. I've sold a ton on Bring a Trailer and whatnot. Yeah.
Do you have any installed in a car?
Not at present.
Yeah. Would you screw a set into a dashboard?
Yeah. Why not? Why not? Like, listen, I'm not like a purist with my cars.
Yeah.
I want to enjoy them. I don't want to save them for the next guy.
Flannel Bob also says, what are the best automotive influences designs in the watch world? Car-inspired watches usually suck.
Yeah.
Most of them are trash.
Yeah, you look at like the Hublot Ferrari.
Yeah.
Like all that bullshit.
I mean, respect where it's due. The Jacob Bugatti engine, aesthetically, I'm not into it, but mechanically, pretty cool.
Pretty cool. But aesthetically,
there was a guy wearing one at Motorlux, and it was so huge. It was so crazy.
It's such an eyesore on your wrist. It's too much, man. It's too much. It's too much.
But I do respect the engineering.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
But like a good one, where is it done well? It's done well when it's a very light hand.
Yes.
Really light.
I don't. Even the Porsche design watches are not like,
they're not my favorite.
Styled by cars though.
Like the Chopard Mille Miglia is like pretty good.
The newer ones have like that carbon fiber. Yeah,
pretty
cool.
good.
Yeah.
But usually it's bad. It's usually bad. Chappie says birth year watch up to $20,000, 1973. Pretty good year.
You have a lot of options. Obviously, the only way to really properly get a birth year watch is stick to Rolex because you can date them more or less, or find a watch that has box and papers from another brand where you could confirm the year of production. Because most brands, except for very few like Patek Philippe, Omega, when they are issuing their extracts, they are not right now. They suspended the service. Will not tell you the exact year, but. Up to $20,000, yeah, you're looking at Rolex GMTs, Submariners, Omega Speedmasters, stuff like that. But I'm gonna put this out there. Maybe consider not getting a birth year watch. I find personally that it distracts people from buying the good watch in lieu of the watch that fits a certain year that you were born. And when it's on your wrist, you can't tell the difference whether it was born. It's a very psychological thing. So I understand a lot of people like doing that, but it drives me nuts when people overlook the better watch because one was fit for a certain year that you can't even really confirm. Because even with Rolex, like there are guidebooks that will tell you, from 1.0 to 1.5, it's 1962. Fine. But sometimes watches were sold years after they were delivered to the store, and Rolex will never confirm those production numbers and production years. It's just our guess as collectors of the information that we've, collaborated on for years and doing our best. So
I've never been into the birth year watch. Maybe it's because 1981 was a pretty shit year for watches anyway. It's not great
cool stuff.
But like, there's nothing where it's like, I gotta have that. But like it doesn't. I understand a birth year car more than I understand a birth year watch. Forest Humps, good username, are dive watches that don't see water. The GT3 RS that never sees a track. I think that's an extreme way of putting it because
I understand what you're saying.
Dive watches are also just tough everyday watches.
Yes. And I was talking about that actually, I forget where recently, where you don't have to use a dive watch actually diving to enjoy it, and It's like, for example, you talk about the Rolex Submariner. It is the most iconic watch and recognizable watch in the world for a reason because it works in every scenario. And if you're not diving, maybe you jump in the pool with it, fine. But you could wear it in literally any occasion and you won't look out of place. Like fucking James Bond wore it with a tuxedo.
Yeah.
So it's kind of transcended that realm of just being a dive watch. There are other dive watches that are very specific dive watches that, yes, if you don't use them for diving, what are you fucking doing?
The dive watches that will survive hundreds of meters past where a person would be crushed.
Correct.
To me, and look, I own a deep sea,
Right.
so like, I get it, but like, it's stupid. But like, that to me is like, that's the closer. Not your average dive watch is not this example,
Right.
But like a deep sea or a flow prof or whatever. Granted, there's an aesthetic there, and you are more than willing to explore.
The Flow Prof, for example, like if you buy that and you don't use it to do a little diving, like maybe because that's like very intensely and aesthetically a dive watch.
But
so
like
I guess,
a person's body will be crushed at 300 feet or so. And if your watch can go to 12,000 feet.
Keep sinking without you.
I think we're beyond what's necessary.
Like the Titanic thing that blew up, there's probably some Submariners down there.
Yeah. There's a deep sea down there taking
Someone
away.
get down there and get it.
They were really just trying to grab someone's watch they dropped, and they're like, no, we're going to look at the Titanic.
Yeah, dude. That's hilarious. Last one. Old Rusty Bimmer says, this is a car question. A YouTuber referred to the Ioniq 5N as a hot hatch. I have yet to see one in person, but it looks pretty big on screen. I thought it was a CRV type crossover. What car would you compare it to size-wise? That's actually tricky. That car, it drives smaller than it is, and it looks smaller than it is in photos, but it's not quite CRV. But like it's bigger than
So close.
it's like if you took a GTI and blew it up by 25%.
Yeah.
It's definitely not an SUV, but it's also not a hot hatch. Right?
I'm going to look up the length.
Like I understand why somebody would call it an SUV, but it
It
really
is
does not feel like an SUV.
5 inches longer than a new RAV4.
Really?
Yeah. It's 185.6 inches long.
Oh, so that's.
And it's
I wonder if
yeah.
because the wheels are pushed out really far to the corners that it hides its
I think
size
so.
better.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like an SUV when you drive it for sure.
But when you walk around it, you go, this is a big car.
Yeah.
It definitely looks bigger.
It feels like a tall hatch.
So one of the electric ones?
Yeah, it's the really fast one. The one that has the fake gearbox.
Yeah.
It's fucking awesome. It's so cool. I love it. All right, we'll save the rest of the car questions for our cruise show, which we're going to record, I don't know when. Friday afternoon. And then I'm going on a road trip to Arizona.
Nice.
For the Road and Track. I'm scouting the route for the next Road and Track event, which is in November, and I believe it's sold out. But if you want to come drive with me to see if there's any spots left, it's experiences.roadandtrack.com.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It's going to be a good time. Thanks, Adam.
Dude, thanks for having me.
Mentawatches.com, MENTA. We'll put the link in the show notes. Lot of inventory. I just looked.
Oh, that's a fraction of it.
Well, great. Even more inventory. There's more inventory.
There's more stuff.
And if you want something that's not listed, shoot them
we
a
try
note.
to curate the website very specifically.
Yeah.
So if you're ever looking for something specific that's not there, you could always contact.
I want that. I want the mother of pearl
It's a gift
Daytona
for you.
with the
You have a mother of pearl Daytona.
I do, but mine has Roman numerals, and it's the only thing I don't like about it. I love everything else about it except that. And I was thinking of maybe trading up to the mother of pearl one that has the diamonds in it, but that one's not really for me either. That one, which has the Arabic meaning like American numbers, that's the fucking one.
I will check when I get home. We can talk about it.
Yeah, maybe we do a trade.
Yeah.
Maybe we do a trade. I really like mine, and
Well, that
mine
would be
is,
the idea.
mine is yellow gold.
Yeah.
And as a Jew in his 40s, I need to have at least one yellow gold.
White gold.
I know. I like the white gold. Yeah. I don't the yellow versus the white. I'm agnostic actually.
Right.
It's more about is that white mother of pearl?
It's
Mine
like
is
yellow.
black mother of pearl.
Yeah, it's like a yellow color.
Yeah.
I think it's considered black because it's yellow.
Mine is
But, like,
the Tahitian
whatever, like-
black pearl. Yeah.
I'm not sure what like like
I don't know,
rocket
it's
is.
fucking
it's
sick, though.
it's crazy.
Is it
It's
listed
crazy
on your
watching.
website, or is that just a
I
private
just
stock?
picked it up yesterday.
Money
I took
move.
it back yesterday.
It's a money move.
It's yeah.
Yeah, I like it. And mine came on
This
that
was my personal watch,
same,
and then I sold it to a
oh,
very
really?
good friend, a local artist here in LA, huge watch guy, great friend of mine. And I told him, like, when you're tired of it, like, come back to daddy.
Yeah.
You know? So it's
The
coming back to
only
daddy.
problem with that watch is the same problem with mine, which is the Oyster Flex strap doesn't fit on the early clasp.
We'll hit up Mark. We'll find somebody.
Well, what
He
I
can-
have.
I'm sure he has a strap, or we'll make a strap.
No,
that'll fit.
what
Yeah.
I have a rubber B. I have a fake Oyster Flex.
Okay.
But at home, I have a real Oyster Flex that won't fit
Oh,
the
yeah,
older
no,
class.
Rolex does it on purpose.
They don't.
So
they
that
do it
you
on
cannot-
purpose.
you have to buy a
Right.
new
so
watch.
they want
Yeah.
$9,000
No.
for a clasp, and I'm
you.
like, no,
No way.
I might be a sucker, but there's suckers, and then there's $9,000 for a fucking clasp.
I was born on a Monday, but not this Monday, my friends.
Out of here, bro. All right, thanks, Adam.
Dude,
Good to
thank
see you,
you.
dude. And your documentary that they're filming for will be out, I don't know, eventually?
Eventually.
Eventually.
We're filming for like the next 8 to 10 months, so
All
it's
right.
going to be a while.
So, yeah, a true eventually.
True eventually.
All right, thanks,
thank you.
guys. Thank you to our patrons for such good questions today, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
I went the whole time.